Hi, everybody, and good afternoon, almost good evening, to the 20th Florida Keys Mosquito Control Oxitec Public Educational Webinar. Our topic tonight is the FKMCD Oxitec Mosquito Project, kind of a mid-year update. You've seen some of what we've done in 2021, how far we've come along in 2022, where we are, and where we expect to be. A few ground rules before we really get started. Our speakers today are Andrea Leo, Executive Director of the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District. Welcome, Andrea. And Dr. Kevin Gorman, Chief Development Officer, CDO of Oxitec. Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Let's get some housekeeping out of the way before we really jump in. We've been hosting a series of public educational webinars for a couple of years now. We're up to our 20th. These webinars are open to everyone. They are recorded and they are made available for everyone after the event. We will provide the link. All questions relating to the webinar topics will be answered tonight. Some might be in batches if they are related. If you feel that your question you didn't have a chance to ask your question, or we didn't quite get to your question, we will accept them afterwards. Please send your question about tonight's webinar topic to florida@oxitec.com. Our agenda tonight is really an update as to where we are in our Florida project. Our agenda will be the background, our project design, current status, the independent oversight, community engagement, and then we'll get to the questions. I'll defer here to Andrea and I'll mute my microphone.
Thank you, Rajiv. We always kind of like to start these webinars explaining why in the Florida Keys we're looking at utilizing these novel technologies. Aedes aegypti has really been an issue for us here in the Florida Keys, really starting about a decade ago. Aedes aegypti itself is extremely difficult to control. We've seen resistance to our current insecticides that we're using. But really what happened was we saw a dengue outbreak occur back in 2009 and 2010. And this is the first time that we have seen dengue in the Florida Keys since the 1930s. So as you can imagine, we were pretty concerned. With everything available to us with mosquito control, we were still seeing transmission ongoing and still seeing a good number of these mosquitoes. So again, very difficult to control. And then fast forward to 2020, and we saw another outbreak in the Florida Keys in Key Largo this time with just over 70 cases. And we're seeing a number of these disease introductions happening, especially here in South Florida. This year particularly, we've seen about 250 introduced cases, travel-related cases in Florida. And we're seeing the majority of those from Cuba. Also in Miami-Dade this year, we are seeing locally acquired cases circulating. They are up to 7 locally acquired cases, which means that their mosquitoes are transmitting dengue. We've also seen in Collier County their first case of dengue fever in over 20 years. So with all of these disease introductions that we're seeing, we still have the mosquito population that can transmit these diseases, which of course is a big concern for us here at Mosquito Control. Additionally, Aedes aegypti was also responsible for the Zika outbreak that occurred in Miami-Dade in 2016. It's just a very difficult mosquito to control. They like to live around people. So these are the ones that are living around your homes. buckets, bird baths, any little bit of standing water, which is why it's so difficult to control these mosquitoes. They pretty much they're able to survive in just very small amounts of water. So it's very hard to figure out exactly where they're coming from, which is why we're looking at this particular tool. The Oxitec mosquito has the ability to, seek and find those mosquitoes where, we can't find them. So really just wanted to give the background on, why we at the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District are so interested. We really, as mosquito control, need as many tools in our toolbox as we possibly can get to control Aedes aegypti specifically. With that, I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Rajiv.
Thank you for that introduction, Andrea. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. And we'd like to go over some of those basics when we talk about what Andrea referred to, right? Oxitec's Aedes aegypti. Before we even begin, it's important that only female mosquitoes bite. And that is true for all mosquito species. Only females bite, only females imbibe blood, only females are capable of transmitting pathogens. Male mosquitoes, and this is not unique to the Oxitec Aedes aegypti, this is true for all male mosquitoes. Male mosquitoes do not have the mouth parts to actually pierce skin. They don't have the salivary glands to digest blood, and they don't have the enzymes to digest blood. Only female mosquitoes bite and imbibe blood. Male mosquitoes are incapable of doing that. And so with the Oxitec technology, because our males carry a gene specific for female Aedes aegypti larval mortality, it's a very targeted trait, right? So there is a place for pesticide in mosquito control. Pesticides play a very important role in mosquito control. This is a very targeted approach toward one species of mosquito, and that is a non-native invasive species called Aedes aegypti, which feeds and breeds in and around people's homes. So it is very difficult to actually target with traditional mosquito control using larvicides, that is, components that kill mosquito larvae, or traditional adulticides, which kill mosquito adults. In addition, the Oxitec Aedes aegypti is safe, non-toxic, and non-allergenic. Male mosquitoes mate with female mosquitoes. And when our male mosquitoes mate with the invasive female Aedes aegypti, that leads to fertilization. So those female eggs are then fertilized. When the female lays her eggs, the gene is specific for her female progeny. So the next generation males live. They live as larvae, they pupate, and they emerge as adult male mosquitoes, which are capable of transmitting that gene the next time they mate. However, the female progeny of the mated female will die as larvae. So it's a very specific female larvicide for Aedes aegypti. And we've shown that it's effective. And in fact, Kevin will mention some of that. We've shown that it's been effective in Brazil. We've had 100% female mortality here in Aedes aegypti in the Florida Keys. So we know that if a female larva carries that gene, she doesn't make it to adulthood. We've also looked at the males that we have released in Brazil and in the US. Remember, male mosquitoes do not bite. We have not released any female mosquitoes, male mosquitoes only. They are traceable in the field, which means that when we release our male mosquitoes, they carry the gene for female larval mortality. They also carry a gene for a red fluorescent protein. And so we can look at them under the microscope, where larvae might be morphologically indistinguishable from the local invasive species. But when you look at it under a red filter, ours show a red fluorescent protein. So it's really easy to tell which ones were sired by our males. And finally, they are self-limiting in the environment. In other words, when we release male mosquitoes, of course, their male progeny will carry the gene, 100% of them. But from generation to generation to generation, you have fewer and fewer males, which means that once we stop releasing male Oxitec Aedes aegypti, there will be no more gene presence in the environment. We have been monitoring that since last year. We will continue to monitor that for this year. So this is a self-limiting gene specific for female Aedes aegypti. Briefly about 2021, our self-limiting gene maintained its effectiveness against female Aedes aegypti in the field. So that means if we found a fluorescent larva from the field and brought it into the lab, every single time that fluorescent larva emerged as an adult male. Not a single fluorescent larva that we collected emerged as a female. So it was 100% effective, killing female larvae of this invasive species. We looked at dose rates and determined that they were suitable for commercial and homeowner use. And that's part of what we're continuing to do this year. Our boys, let's just say our boys found their girls. So our Oxitec males found the local invasive Aedes aegypti females, successfully mated with them, and we could actually quantify that mating success. So we know that female Aedes aegypti that mated with our males laid eggs in the cups that we put out, and they laid eggs in natural and artificial sites. So mating did not affect oviposition or egg-laying behavior of mated female Aedes aegypti. We also found that box dosing, that is the number of boxes and the output of boxes, established an effective overflooding of our males against the invasive Aedes aegypti. We mentioned they mated successfully, and maybe most counterintuitive about this, but a very pleasant discovery, was that the progeny of our males and the invasive females were found in natural breeding sites. So we found larvae carrying the lethality gene in water that had collected in jet skis, in wheelbarrows, in children's toys. So that means that females that carried the gene laid the eggs in natural and artificial oviposition sites. And that is females that are invasive, that are local, and they picked up this gene during insemination and mating, and so they transmitted it to the next generation. Their males lived, their female progeny died. And again, cannot stress this enough. We did not release any female Aedes aegypti. I will pause here and I'll mute and turn this over to Kevin, who will talk about project this year.
Great stuff. Thanks, Rajiv. And thanks, Andrea, too, for the introductions. Maybe I'd just remind everybody to try and get their questions in. They don't need to wait to the end here. There's a Q&A chat box function somewhere on your page, and feel free to pop in questions there, and then we can pick them up as they come through and have them ready at the end. So please do get your questions in. They're all anonymous, and so you know, your name won't be associated with a particular question. We'll read them anonymously. Great. Well, appreciate the introduction by Rajiv. As I say, you know, somewhat technical, some of this in some ways. So, you know, if that stimulates some questions, great. Hopefully I'll cover a little bit of that again as I go through the project for 2022. Yeah, feel free to get those questions in as and when. So firstly, the 2022 pilots are, we call them pilots, but they're regulatory trials, regulatory studies, same as the 2021 data. It's a prerequisite of a registration, a commercial registration in the US, to provide regulatory data that's sought under an experimental use permit. And that's what we have. So these are small trials over relatively small areas, just tens of acres for the maximum plot size. We have replication to ensure that the results are robust and that there's some statistical significance that we can prove in the data. The protocols themselves, they are developed in conjunction with the regulators. This is EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in this case. So the EPA and subsequently the state regulators in FDACS, the Florida Department of Consumer and Agricultural Services, they look at the protocols, review them, amend them, suggest make changes, and in conjunction with those regulators, those protocols are set in stone, if you like, and then we have to abide by those protocols as we go through and ensure we collect the data in a specific way. What are we measuring? Well, a combination here of performance and biology. We're looking at biological attributes that would contribute to a package demonstrating safety to the regulators, but also data that might demonstrate performance of the product, so that efficacy can be measured or effectiveness can be measured. And so that can be looked at by the regulators to determine that it is of value to people who would want to use it. So a particular type of study, if you like, and as you can imagine, and I've just partly described, these studies go through a regulatory process. In the case of EPA, it took them 14 months for this particular EUP. They do a very comprehensive review, and they approved an extension of that original EUP to allow us to a little bit longer to work in the Florida Keys and with this particular project. Alongside that review process, everybody's probably aware that there was a public comment period. Those who were interested were able to leave comments, and there was several thousand comments that were left, and the EPA responded to each and every one of those prior to making their decision. And all of those documents are available online at the link shown. Subsequent to EPA, we had an approval by FDACS, and that was granted in 2020. And that was the final regulatory step for us to proceed with the project, of course, under the oversight, guidance, and permission of FKMCD. Project aims for 2022, largely similar to 2021. It's about replication in essence. So 2021 aimed to look at, was our first look in the US at this particular product and how it might interact with the local mosquitoes. And we're supplementing that data in 2022. That data will contribute to a Section 3 application or an application for commercial approval in due course. And as I mentioned, there's biology and performance data there. Some of the biology aspects include dispersal and longevity. How far do our males fly? How long do they live? Are they mating well? Is there any kind of barrier that we could observe there? Is there any particular side effect on, non-target species, for instance, Aedes albopictus? We also look at other species as well. But it also looks at performance, and that really is about coverage. How far does the product cover if you release from a single point? If you release from multiple points, does it effectively cover the area, and is the dose high enough to gain good control? The studies are split into 3 different designs for 2022. Project B, Project D, and Project E. Don't pay too much attention to the letters. We had several project designs. Some were 2021, some 2022. But essentially, it's 3 designs, B, D, and E. And B is a area-wide study. So we have multiple boxes, and in the picture there, you can see just from the dots, the blue ones are the release boxes. It's a schematic diagram surrounded by a network of ovitraps and also some adult traps. Those are the traps that we use to collect the sample, to sample the population and understand the changes in abundance that are happening at the same time as we treat. Alongside that, of course, we're doing untreated areas, and it's a comparison between the treated and untreated areas that give us the data for the regulators. Some of the data points that we look at are efficacy, as Rajiv was just explaining. Efficacy in this case is the the percentage kill of females, and we have 100% in this case. So all females that were produced, that were collected, died before adulthood. We look at adult sex ratios. So this is essentially the numbers game between our males and the wild males, who are both competing for the same females to mate with. We're looking at the proportion of the population treated. That is the number or percentage or proportion of offspring that are sired by our males as compared to those sired by wild ones. Then the residual activity, something that EPA are particularly keen on, is an examination of residual activity. That's the length or duration of effect once we've stopped treating. So how long do our males keep surviving in the field and keep providing some control benefit? And then, subsequently, do they disappear, and how long before they do? And then, as Rajiv also alluded to, their presence in cryptic breeding sites. It's a very useful thing if we can show that that the females mated by our males are laying in areas which are difficult to access with conventional insecticides. It demonstrates that the technology is getting into all the nooks and crannies of the environment. Project D, a household scale study. It's measuring similar things, as you can see from the list of bullets there, but it's doing it on a household scale. So this is a single point release on a single property, then with traps on the property to examine exactly what happens and see if we can actually demonstrate that a property that is releasing these mosquitoes is at a lower risk of having biting females on the property than one that isn't. And again, we have significant replication to make sure that we can show the difference statistically. And then finally, Project EMARC release for capture. It's a kind of run-of-the-mill biological tool for looking at insect populations and for examining the numbers that are out there. It allows us to look at dispersal distance, which is very convenient. So we can release large numbers of mosquitoes from a single central point, and then we can look using an array of traps, as you see in the schematic, how far they fly, how far they go and disperse. But also we can look over time and see what their longevity is, because we can see how long we're picking them up for. And it allows us to look at one or two other parameters too. So a range of performance and biological metrics, as I mentioned, and here are those two traps that I referred to. The first on the left-hand side there is a simple plastic cup. That cup is filled with water, and it's essentially a breeding site for, or should I say an egg-laying site for females. Females that are mated, they've blood-fed, and then they will come into the trap and they will lay their eggs on the underside of a wooden paddle that's in the water. And it's particularly attractive to them, and it's a great way of picking up mosquito samples very, very cheaply and very efficiently. We can have lots of these out, and it's certainly a very convenient way of catching lots of the population. We use those particular eggs as they come in to look at the efficacy. So we had well over 20,000 come in 2021, for example, and all of those are reared through to adulthood. And as Rajiv was pointing out, every single one of the fluorescent ones we captured turned out to be a male when it came through as an adult, demonstrating that all the females died. And that supplements a lot of data that we have from Brazil, where we also have tens of thousands of collections, all proving to be male only when they get to adulthood. Those ovitraps are really sensitive as well. They're great for looking at changes in abundance, and so they're our key metric. The adult mosquito collections are done with what's called a BG trap. It's a proprietary trap from a particular company, and they are excellent in catching adults. They require power, slightly more laborious when it comes to processing, but they're great for looking at the ratios between female and female adults, and serve as a really good purpose in doing so. Last on the right-hand side there is the stereo microscope. Rajiv was talking about the fluorescent gene, and you can see on the right-hand side there some fluorescent larvae glowing red under the microscope. So project status. So this is a quick, I would say, overview of exactly where we are with the 3 projects as of now. Project B started in around about the second week of May this year. We have seen that our males, as in 2021, are coming out of the boxes well. They're dispersing nicely. We're getting mating right throughout the areas. And so that's certainly showing us that our males are actually doing their job well, searching and finding and mating with wild pest females. We've collected all those larvae, all those eggs, hatched them out as larvae, as I mentioned. And again, all those female offspring have died as expected, and we've got males coming through in abundance. Then we've got, speaking of abundance, we are seeing reductions in the overall abundance. That's being observed in different treated sites compared to the controls. So great to see that that kill of female offspring is translating to a reduction in the abundance of the population. And as we're around about 4 months into the project now, we've got probably 2 to 3 months to go before the end of the season. And so we're well on the way through towards the home stretch for Project B. And again, we're already obviously finding our offspring, fluorescent offspring, that is, in natural breeding sites or cryptic breeding sites that are usually difficult to treat with conventional insecticides, and that represents good coverage of the area. Project D, that also started back in July, that one was, and it's looking good already. We've got, thanks to some volunteers, we were oversubscribed, and thanks to those homeowners, because we've got quite a lot of traps on some of those premises, and those individual homes are where we're releasing, and then we're trapping, as I mentioned in the previous slides. We are about a month into that project, and so the first data sets are coming in as we speak, and we'll be able to report a little bit more on what we're seeing, but we're certainly seeing that the males are coming out of the boxes and dispersing well. We've now just got to see if the coverage is good, and also what the proportions of mating look like. And then Project E, that's not due to start until early September. And so at the moment we're doing canvassing for that one, looking at which properties we'll be using, and again, thanks to the community for all their patience and support during this process. So preparation's well underway, and we'll have more to follow on that one in the coming weeks when we have specific dates and specific locations for everybody. So that's the status of the project in 2022 so far, and of course at the end of these data collections we'll then interpret, analyze the data, prepare a report, and pass that to the regulators, to FKMCD and to others for validation. Some of you may remember from 2021 that we had an independent advisory group. So although the protocol and the results are evaluated by the regulators, assessed by the regulators, and then and then we get feedback on that, of course, in terms of the protocol, and of course, and the results themselves will contribute to a potential commercial approval. We also had an independent advisory group who are giving us their expert guidance along the way, looking at how we're doing things. That could be working in the community, that could be technical aspects, it could be something more broad. And pillars of the community, if you like, people with particular knowledge that's relevant, and they meet quarterly, and thanks to all 4 of them, they are stalwarts of the project and are continuing to advise and guide us during 2022. And community engagement continues, of course, as well. This is something that we've been doing for a long time now in the Florida Keys, and it certainly won't stop just because we've got the projects going. So you can still find us at various events around the community. You can still see the webinars that we have here on a monthly basis. We'll still be passing out information, and that could be in various formats. It could be radio, it could be newspapers, or door-to-door. But we're working hard in the community still, and making sure that as much information gets out there, and whenever people need something, that we're on hand to answer any questions. Here are a few of the just reminders, if you like, in terms of the radio stations that we're advertising on or that we're announcing on, a couple of newspapers, and also some of the events that we've attended. And so last slide, just a quick summary here of where we've got to today. Project B's and Projects B and D, as I mentioned, were underway, and Project E is just around the corner. Overscribed for Projects B and D. Thank you so much to all those volunteers. Keep them coming though. Project E is out there. We're canvassing now, and Rajiv is leading our efforts there. So we may well be knocking on your door soon. And you know, it's great news that our male mosquitoes are behaving as we expected them to. Not that we expected anything different, but it's great to see that they're getting out there, mating well, that there's results coming in that we feel justifying the performance of our male mosquitoes, and showing particularly that we have 100% female lethality, and the male offspring are doing a good job for us. No hurricanes to date. I mean, I shouldn't have said that, because it's probably tempting fate, and tropical storms on the horizon potentially. But thankfully, unlike last year, at this point we have not had any hurricanes this year. So good news. But we've got good procedures in place, so that if they do come, we can pivot accordingly and be back out there as soon as that hurricane or tropical storm passes. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be sending reports to the regulators for review once we're all tied up and we've done the analysis. So watch this space more in due course. And with that, Rajiv, I shall hand back to you.
Thank you, Kevin. We have a couple questions now, but we need more, so I'm just soliciting, please, if you're watching now, submit your questions and we'd be happy to answer them. Anything having to do with our progress to date, any questions about our 2021 results, what does Project B or D look like now, and the timeline for Project E, let us hear from you. We do have a question that I think is really appropriate for Andrea. Andrea, you alluded to earlier that yes, there have been cases of dengue in the Florida Keys in the past, and now there have been 7 locally acquired cases of dengue in Miami-Dade. Are cases of dengue occurring further north of the Florida Keys over time? So I guess it's a question about where is dengue occurring, and if you could comment on that.
Sure. Well, historically in the United States, all of Florida has seen dengue. So, we have seen it north of the Florida Keys, all the way up through the historic range of Aedes aegypti. But what we're really seeing now are the number of introductions to Florida itself, particularly in the Miami area. I think has really exacerbated the issue. Hundreds of cases coming in each year. And, the close relationship that Miami has with the Caribbean, with Central and South America, where you find a number of dengue cases every year. I think that's why we see what we do here in South Florida. And unfortunately, what we've also seen is when We see these locally acquired cases in Miami-Dade. We have the potential to see trickling into Monroe County. And we have a number of folks that visit from Miami on the weekends. You know, there's a lot of movement back and forth between Monroe County and Miami-Dade. So, of course, you know, what we see right now is very concerning, and really is the push for us to continue looking for, you know, any control methods that we can find for Aedes aegypti particularly.
Thank you, Andrea. The next two questions are actually very closely related. Are the results of Oxitec's projects in the Florida Keys consistent with the company's expectations? And the question after that is, would you consider the results of your projects in the Keys to be a success so far? So maybe, Kevin, if you could take these two.
Yeah, sure. Well, we certainly do consider them to be a success so far. Yeah, absolutely. Rajiv's slide highlighted some of the key points from 2021, and it ticked a lot of the boxes. We had hurricanes last year, and that certainly we had to bring everything in and then put everything back out again once it had finished. So that caused us several interruptions, because I think we had three distinct pull downs and then startups. So, you know, there were issues, but it's a field study, and there always are. And the teams worked well to gather the right data regardless. So it was certainly a success in 2021, and 2022 is on the same trajectory. Early to say because the data is coming in, but certainly the signs that we're seeing show that 2022 is also proving to give us good results. In terms of how we would see it compared with other projects, every project's different, but it's certainly in line with what we would have expected to see. We've had high percentages of suppression in projects all around the world so far. And Aedes aegypti is very, very similar, whether it's in Florida or whether it's in Brazil or whether it's in Panama or whether it's in the Cayman Islands. You know, the environments, you know, do differ, but the mosquito itself doesn't differ so much. Genetically, they're very, very similar, as they've. It's an invasive species, and it's not that long since it's been moving around the world, primarily due to human movement as well as trade. So we don't see many differences between different study sites typically, and we're quite hopeful that it's going to be the same here, and we'll get some nice, good suppression results.
Thank you, Kevin. Andrew, the next question is for you. You've seen this technology firsthand in your position as Executive Director of the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District. Oh boy, this is putting you on the spot. Would you consider adopting Oxitec technology? Well, they say if it became available commercially. I'm going to change the wording. When it becomes available commercially, would you consider adopting it? Pay no attention to the fact that you are presenting with Kevin and me.
Yeah, that does definitely put me on the spot. But as I've said all along through this entire process, we at Mosquito Control want to see how every single technology against Aedes aegypti works. And what we like to do is, you know, we like to try it out, you know, do trials, see how effective it can be. And then, of course, we have to look at cost. So, you know, once I'll say, okay, Rajiv, once this becomes commercially available, we at the district will do a robust cost benefit analysis and take, you know, all of those things into consideration. I will say, of course, you know, what we've seen so far, we've seen reductions happening in release areas, which is great. So for us at Mosquito Control, every little bit of population reduction we can do with Aedes aegypti, you know, we're going to be all for. But prior to real implementation, just like any other product that we may use, we would have to do a cost benefit analysis.
Thank you, Andrea. Kevin, the next one is for you. It's a tough one, actually. Do Oxitec Aedes aegypti have the same susceptibility / resistance to pesticides as the local Aedes aegypti? I don't know how to answer that, but I hope you do.
Yeah, I think that one's okay. Our mosquitoes are, come from a parental laboratory strain. Of course, many years back they came from the wild, but they were collected from a background that was insecticide susceptible. Then we've reared them in such a way that ensures that they are insecticide susceptible, so they don't carry resistance genes to any insecticides. Certainly not insecticides that are used these days, in today's real world. That's very useful, of course, because what it means is we're not introducing any exotic genes, whether we use them in Florida or whether we use them in Brazil or whether we use them somewhere else. We're not introducing new exotic genes, resistance genes from Brazil to Florida or vice versa. So very useful from that perspective. But also, of course, it means that one of the targets of this particular technology is the introgression of our susceptibility. So most populations these days are resistant to some extent. And certainly in the US and in Florida, there's a lot of pyrethroid resistance. So pyrethroids are a commonly used compound. It's typically used as an adulticide. And we see pretty strong widespread resistance to pyrethroids, in populations all the way around the world. It's almost ubiquitous. Then we've got organophosphates, carbamates, other insecticides, more conventional ones, but then we've got some more contemporary ones, some more modern ones, some larvicides and others which don't have any resistance in the wild population. So there's a mix from pyrethroids and some of the more conventional ones, which you could call to be high resistance or medium to high resistance, through to maybe tolerance, low levels of resistance, and even susceptibility in the wild ones, depending upon the compound. Oxitec is susceptible to all of them, all of them the same. And so there is this distinct difference in responses in most places, and some places that response will be the difference in response will be greater than others. But in all cases, we're susceptible, and we feel that's a real benefit. Because that introgression of insecticide susceptibility means that we can actually dilute the resistance that's out there and hopefully be synergistic with insecticides. So the more Oxitec is used, the more effective the insecticides become, and that allows for a very, more robust strategy that's more integrated, but certainly more encompassing, allowing different strategies to be combined together.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next question is for Andrea, and here it is. Can you speak to how homeowners and participants in the Keys have felt about living with Oxitec technology? What has been the feedback from the community?
So we've had excellent community support throughout this entire process. And really it began with a local referendum that was on the ballot in 2016. Prior to our board making any decision to move forward with the project, we really wanted to take the pulse of the community. How did they feel about this? We got great support from the majority of the voting precincts. So it really kind of set the tone as far as that community engagement. And from there, we've seen oversubscription, as Kevin mentioned, not only this year, but last year as well. More people want to participate and either host a release device or a trap for the project. We've gotten really great feedback from the community, and they've been extremely supportive. And I find that, as we continue moving forward, more and more folks are wanting to sign up and participate. So really feel that the community support has been great. And, it says a lot for our community to be behind some of these novel technologies. So it's, the Florida Keys, and we're a great place to live for sure.
Before jumping to the next, let me add my 2 cents. Yeah. My 2-year anniversary with Oxitec is coming up. And so I've been canvassing and knocking on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of doors in the past 18 months. And I started with some trepidation because I had heard that there would be some pushback. And I am consistently surprised and relieved that the response from the community has been so gracious. It's been enthusiastic. Last year, because of tropical storms, we had to remove boxes, put them back, and then remove them again and put them back. It really pushed our timeline out. And I apologized to homeowners saying, I'm really sorry. I thought we would end at the end of July, but we're pushing it out another month and another month. I hope that's okay. And every one of our hosts said, absolutely. We support you. We think what you're doing is important. We think what you're doing is valuable, and we support the science. And I'm not that shocked anymore when people sign up. I think it's been a real outpouring of support. People have been very gracious. And so, yeah, if I can just add to what you just said, it's been a very good experience. And it continues now. We are canvassing for Project E. Project E is the Mark Release Recapture. And if you are interested in participating in that, and if you are in the neighborhoods where we would do something like that, let us know. You can check it out on oxitec.com/Florida. You can also check it out at keysmosquitoproject.com. Please sign up. And you can write to us directly at florida@oxitec.com. A follow-up question here for Kevin. Oh, this is a delicate one. Are you planning more studies for 2023?
Great question. We will see. We will have to see. We anticipate that we may have a pretty good data set by the end of 2022. We will have done the level of replication that the EPA, have requested, and so. But there's always plenty more we can do. These products, we can, as with all products, you can constantly improve them. You can constantly gather more data to generate different label claims. But as with every product, they're never finished. There's always room for improvement. And so, yet to be discussed, but I wouldn't close the door or keep it open either way at this moment. We're waiting to see how the results come in for 2022, and then we'll look to see if we've got any gaps. And then, of course, with Andrea's blessing, we'll look to keep the partnership going. I'm sure in what form or guise we shall yet see, but certainly pretty exciting. And as I say, it's been a long-term partnership with Andrea and Florida Keys Mosquito Control District so far, and we'd love to keep that going.
Andrea, would you like to comment on that?
No, other than just to echo what Kevin said, we've been working closely with Oxitec for the better part of a decade, trying to get this project started. It took a very long time. So these last couple of years have been extremely exciting because we've really worked hard to get where we are now. And the fact that we're getting a really great data set this year and haven't had those interruptions, I think is also, one of the best situations we could have. And again, we'll see how we go at the end of this year and what next year could bring for this partnership.
Fabulous. Thank you, Andrea. A technical question for Kevin. How many mosquitoes did Oxitec release in 2021?
Less than 5 million in total, if my memory serves me right. But yeah, less than 5 million in total. It was some way less, to be honest. It was probably 2 to 3. Yeah, less than 5 million in total. So just to sort of bit of background, I guess, there was a lot of discussion at first about these huge numbers, billions potentially of mosquitoes being released. The EPA set us limits on how many we can release per acre, and then when you times that up by the maximum number of acres we could possibly release in, then that gives a very, very large number. But of course, we weren't using all those acres. We weren't using those maximum per acre rates that EPA had limited us to. So we were well below both those thresholds by maybe an order of magnitude. So we end up with a lot less than was often talked about at the very start of the at the studies of the program. And in total, at 2021, it was somewhere under 5 million, as I mentioned, over the course of the season.
Thank you, Kevin.
And across the different project types.
Yeah.
So,
jumping to Andrea, and I mean, Kevin can follow up with this. What has caught you by surprise?
Well, I think I speak for anyone that's done field work. Everything kind of does at one point or another. It takes a while to get the logistics down for studies of this size that, we've never participated in before. Again, the community support has been amazing, but we expected that, even if Rajiv did not. We knew the community was behind us before we started the project. So I haven't seen a whole lot of surprises, really. I mean, the projects themselves are performing as are expected. So I think, at the end of the day, like, the surprises probably will come once we get through all the statistical analysis, so we can really figure out, how well this worked for us here.
Yeah, maybe
Kevin, would you like to take that?
Yeah, maybe I'll add, the community support has been outstanding. So not a surprise that the community were supportive by any stretch, because, as Andrea said, we've been working with them for so long. We kind of knew what to expect, but it's been so strong that it's really, really appreciated. I guess for me, if there's one thing, the tropical storms shouldn't have been a surprise, but they were pretty frequent last year, and they came in quick succession, and caused us a fair bit of disruption. So we're better prepared for those this year, I think, with a slightly different regime, as well as I'm hoping that this is a slightly lighter year in terms of named storms, particularly those in the vicinity of the project. So I'm hoping that I'm not going to be surprised as we go through the remainder of the season. So yeah, fingers crossed. Exactly.
Someone asked me a question today, one of the homeowners, and I think it's good to get this out. That's fine, right? Right now we're releasing males, we're seeing how well they mate, we're looking at the death of female larvae of Aedes aegypti, we're looking at flight radius, we're looking at duration, all that's fine. One of the homeowners today asked, where is all this going, right? What is your goal? And Kevin, I'd like you to answer that. Why are we doing all this?
Sure. Impact is all we're doing it for. Any of us are doing it for. Andrea, ourselves. it's no good just to publish a scientific paper and create some data if it's not going to go anywhere. Sure, it's useful and interesting as a study, as an academic study, but it's all about impact. But Andrea, and Andrea can speak afterwards, it's about protecting the public. For us, it's about facilitating that protection. We're all in it for the same reason, and that's to make an impact by improving people's lives and livelihoods, from saving lives, preventing mortality and morbidity. It's about, improving on what we've got in the toolbox at the moment, and taking a leap forward, hopefully, rather than just a step forward, to ensure that people are better protected. So yeah, it's about impact for all of us, I think, Rajiv. Andrea, would you care to add?
Andrea, where do you see this going? And yeah, why are we doing this?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think anyone in mosquito control, or vendors, developing products, are in it for the same reason. And I think that's really unique for our group of people, because there aren't a lot of us out there, right? So it's not like agriculture where it's big bucks. It's small groups, but it's major impact. So being able to come in and day out, knowing that what we do at mosquito control protects the public, not only their health, but the economy, especially here in the Florida Keys. We saw the impact that Zika had on Miami-Dade, how much money they lost and the impacts that it had, outside of that public health aspect. So, mosquito control is an extremely important thing, especially here in South Florida. And, it is definitely gets me out of bed in the morning and excited to come in. And with the way things change, new developments happen. It's definitely an exciting thing to be a part of.
I want to take that. It's an exciting thing to be a part of. And keep in mind, we have about 3 to 4 minutes left. And I want to take that excitement here. There's a relevant question. The results are exciting. Is Oxitec currently pursuing refinement or changes to their technology? Where do you see this going? So do we see refinements or changes to the current technology? You have about 3 minutes.
Do you want me to take that one, Rajiv? I guess. Always. We never stand still. It doesn't matter whether it's Coca-Cola or a packet of biscuits or, a piece of electronic equipment. There's could be an iPhone. There's always a new, better and improved version that's available. And, this is an early product at the end of the day. It's commercial in Brazil now. You can order it online in Brazil and it gets delivered to your door and you can use it in your backyard. Fantastic achievement to get that far. But we'll be refining and improving all the way, as we go. It could be different sizes of the product. It could be, that the product has, a different frequency, or maybe it's got new diets or new ingredients that allow us to use it in different areas, or maybe the box gets improved with a different format. There are all sorts of improvements that we can make in due course, and if you bear in mind that we're working with other mosquito species, agricultural species, and also now animal health, there's a whole array of technical improvements and progress to be made. So absolutely, Rajiv, we never stand still, and we're continually looking to make the product as good as it possibly can be, for any particular scenario.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, we're almost on the hour, and I'll take this moment. It's okay if we finish a minute early. If we did not get to your questions, that's okay. You can still send it to us at florida@oxitec.com. And if you are interested in signing up for being a host for Project E, the Mark Release Recapture, please contact us at oxitec.com/host. keysmosquitoproject.com/Florida or at keysmosquitoproject.com. And on that, I'd like to thank Andrea Leal and Kevin Gorman for joining us today for our, is it really the 20th webinar? Oh my goodness. And we will be posting this online. Thank you so much.